The film begins with Josh and Dalton, who decide to forget everything that happened in the past. They once had the ability, through their dreams, to enter another world and wander through it, which caused them many problems. Now, 10 years later, they attend the funeral of Josh's father. They stand by the grave and say their goodbyes. Renai, Josh's ex-wife, suggests that Josh drive their son to college so they can spend some time together, especially since Josh has been distant from him lately. Josh initially refuses and heads toward his car, where he notices a man trying to avoid him. Josh approaches him anyway and greets him. The man introduces himself as Carl and says he knew Josh's father, then leaves. Afterward, Josh returns to his car and decides to send his son a message, telling him that he wants to take him to college. Dalton agrees reluctantly, and they head there together. Josh helps his son carry his belongings to his dorm room. On the way, they run into a student handing out flyers. Dalton ignores him, but Josh goes back and takes one to give to Dalton later. Once they reach the room and put the bags down, Josh apologizes for not being there during the past few years, which caused Dalton and his siblings to grow up without him. Moments later, a girl named Chris walks into the room and introduces herself as Dalton's roommate. She puts her things down and quickly leaves to give Josh and Dalton some privacy. Josh then hands Dalton the flyer he picked up, which turns out to be an invitation to a fraternity party. The fraternity is a group of male and female students who stay together throughout their college years, similar to a social club. Dalton gets very upset and reacts angrily. Josh realizes what happened and leaves the room without saying anything. Later, Dalton finishes unpacking and goes back to his room, where he finds Chris playing a musical instrument. They talk for a while, and she lets him try playing it himself. As they continue talking, Dalton tells her that he doesn't remember an entire year of his life when he was 10 years old, as if he fell asleep one day and woke up to find that a whole year had passed. After leaving his son, Josh sends Dalton another message while driving, apologizing for what happened and promising that he will try to understand what he's been going through lately. Dalton then goes to his art class, where Dr. Armageddon tells the students to present anything they like so she can critique it. She is unhappy with most of their drawings and comments harshly on one student's work, turning it into a lesson for the whole class. This causes Dalton to tear up the drawing he made of his mother. Dr. Armageddon is very proud of him and explains that this is a sign he is letting go of his past. Dalton then starts working on a new drawing, and it feels as if his body is moving on its own, without him controlling it. He keeps drawing until he realizes he has drawn a door. Dr. Armageddon asks him a question from an artistic perspective, asking whether the door keeps him inside or outside. The scene then shifts to Josh at the hospital, where he is undergoing a brain scan. Suddenly, the power goes out, and Josh imagines seeing something that causes him to convulse. When he is taken out of the machine, he is extremely frightened and agitated. The doctor tries to calm him down and tells him that he was only asleep for 15 minutes. But this only makes Josh more anxious. The doctor then suggests a few methods that might help stimulate Josh's memories. We return to Dalton as he hangs his new drawing on the wall and stares at it. Suddenly, the lights go out, and he notices something strange about the door in the drawing. Startled, he reaches for his phone. Suddenly, something flies right in front of him, making him scream in terror. He jumps back quickly, falls onto his bed, and hides under the blanket. At that moment, Chris walks into the room and is confused when she sees Dalton lying on the floor. As she comes in, she notices the party flyer and suggests that Dalton go with her so they can have fun at the party. They actually go, and Dalton ends up awkwardly walking behind Chris the whole time. They then enter a room filled with photos hanging all over the walls. Chris leaves him there and walks away, while Dalton stands alone, looking at the pictures. All of a sudden, he hears a sound coming from the bathroom and goes to check what's happening. When he gets there, he sees a man retreating back into the bathroom. When the man lifts his head, Dalton realizes he's crying, in terrible condition, begging Dalton to close the door because Dalton was standing there watching him. Dalton gets terrified, shuts the door, and runs. The room is still dark, just like before, and suddenly the man appears on top of Dalton and drops something onto him. Chris rushes into the room and finds Dalton collapsed on the floor, extremely shaken. When Chris turns on the lights, Dalton is shocked to see that the man has completely disappeared. Chris moves closer to him, and right then the party host walks in, sees them together, and makes a stupid comment about Dalton and Chris. Chris loses her temper, delivers a hard hit below the belt, grabs Dalton, and they both run off. They manage to escape from the party. Later that night, Dalton is alone, drawing while listening to the voice message his father sent him. He turns it off, drifts into his thoughts, and tries to fight sleep in every possible way. Suddenly, the room goes dark again. Out of nowhere, Dalton sees a glowing lantern. He walks toward it, picks it up without looking around the room, leaves, and heads up the stairs to Chris's room. He finds her asleep, turns off the light, and starts playing the musical instrument. When Chris wakes up, Dalton rushes out of the room and runs through the hallways, trying to get back to his own room. Suddenly, he wakes up and realizes he's been asleep in a chair. He hears a knock on his door, and Chris walks in carrying the instrument. She tells him she thought she saw him running out of her room when she woke up and asks him what's going on with him. Dalton admits that he's been seeing strange things and tells her about the man who was on top of him at the fraternity house, explaining that the man is dead. Chris tells him that these visions started after Dr. Armageddon asked them to draw something and after he did. When Dalton mentions the lantern that suddenly appeared and how he went to Chris's room, Chris walks over to the table to look at the painting and discovers that the door has changed and turned red. Dalton then tells her that he feels like he's getting closer to something, and at the same time, something is getting closer to him. Meanwhile, we cut to Josh at his house. He leaves his room and walks past several closed doors on his way to the kitchen to make breakfast. When he comes back, he notices that one door is open. Confused, he walks up to it and shuts it. After breakfast, Josh decides to record messages for himself to help stimulate his memory, using photos of his children and his mother. He yells toward the window, and while trying to tape up a photo of his son, someone suddenly crashes through the window. Josh runs immediately, and when he stops, he's shocked to see the man suddenly standing right in front of him, as if he teleported. The man looks dead, which deeply unsettles Josh. The man starts trying to communicate with Josh and chases him down the stairs. Josh tries to get into his bedroom, but the door slams shut before he can enter. He runs into another room, locks the door behind him, grabs a weapon, and slowly opens the door to look outside, only to find that the man is gone. Confused, Josh turns back into the room, only to be shocked when he sees the man standing right in front of him. Josh runs and hides in the closet, hits something, and loses consciousness. When he wakes up, the place is dark, and he finds a small box with the name, Ben Burton, written on it. He picks it up, and suddenly the power comes back on. We then cut back to Dalton in class, where Dr. Armageddon shows them the best aerial photograph. Dalton asks whether the artwork represents darkness or emptiness, then focuses before drifting off again. He goes back to drawing, following the doctor's instructions, and closes his eyes after she tells them to dig deeply into the darkness of their memories. Dalton digs deep into his memories and sees himself as a child attacking someone with a knife. He snaps back, shocked by what he saw. At the same time, Josh opens the box and finds small photographs, a hospital wristband, and a folded piece of paper inside. He opens the paper and looks stunned by what's written on it. Back with Dalton, he calls his brother and asks about the Red Door, but his brother doesn't know anything about it. Frustrated, Dalton hangs up and stares intensely at the door. He sees a figure with its mouth wide open beneath it, and panics when the door starts to open. Chris enters, pushes the painting aside, sets down her laptop, and tells Dalton that he isn't crazy. She then shows him a video from a show hosted by paranormal investigators, where they talk about astral projection. After that, they show pictures of a woman named Elise. Dalton immediately opens another video, in which Elise talks about astral projection. She explains that through astral projection, people enter a dark world filled with the tortured spirits of the dead. She then says that when you travel to that world, you allow the beings inside it to cross over into your own world. She warns that anyone who travels to that place too often is putting themselves in danger, because each journey becomes more dangerous than the last, and that a person must have strong grounding and stability in the spirit world. When the video ends, Dalton says that the man who appeared to him kept warning him to close the door. Dalton is confused and starts wondering if the man was referring to a door in the future. He wants to see the man again to ask him exactly what he meant, which door he was talking about, and whether there is something important about the red door that he needs to know. Dalton and Chris go to the fraternity house and make up an excuse so they can get upstairs. When they reach the upper floor, they find the room dark, just the way Dalton wanted. They go inside, and Chris starts counting backward. When she reaches 1, Dalton immediately falls asleep. Chris is confused at first, but then she notices a strange person opening the door and stepping out. She thinks it's Dalton, and she's right, it really is him. Dalton goes to the room where he met the man the last time and sees one of the fraternity members there. Suddenly, Dalton hears Chris calling his name, so he heads toward her voice. Out of nowhere, he hears someone yelling at him again, telling him to close the door. Someone tries to stop him and hold him back, but Dalton struggles until he breaks free and goes to Chris, who is choking. He returns to the room and sees another dead person next to Chris. Terrified, he steps back and suddenly wakes up in the real world. At the same moment, one of the fraternity members finds Chris unconscious and rushes to help her. After she regains consciousness, they leave the house. Dalton apologizes to Chris, saying he didn't know anyone would get hurt if he kept going down this path. Chris is deeply upset about what happened to her, and that it was because of Dalton, but at the same time, she's scared that Dalton himself could get hurt. She leaves him and walks away. We then cut to Josh, who has been researching a man named Ben Burton. He discovers that Ben was actually his father, who had passed away, and that he had been diagnosed with multiple mental disorders. Josh goes to Renai's house to tell her everything that happened. He tells her about Ben Burton attacking him in his own home, and about the note Ben sent to his mother before he died, which said that everything would end with him. Josh is confused by what the message means and wonders if Ben was insane. Renai finally tells Josh the truth. She admits that Josh and Dalton can travel to the further, a realm filled with tortured spirits, entities, and ghosts that used to chase them. She also reveals that their memories were erased 10 years ago. Josh explodes in anger at what he hears, and the argument between them escalates until Renai finally breaks down and confesses that Josh once tried to kill his entire family. At the same time, Dalton calls his brother Peter and brings up the red door again, explaining everything that's happened to him because of it so far. He demands to know anything Peter remembers about the door. Peter tells him that their mother used to say the door was just a bad dream, but Dalton insists on knowing the truth. As soon as Peter mentions the basement, Dalton suddenly remembers his old memories from there. He hangs up the phone. Peter goes to their parents and tells them that Dalton has been asking about the red door, which makes them extremely worried. We then see Dalton in his room, screaming as he paints the red door. When he looks at the man in the painting, he feels something deeply wrong. As he tries to grab the hammer, he suddenly realizes he's back in the basement as a child, with his entire family terrified and hiding. Josh then breaks down the door and attacks his mother, and Dalton witnesses everything. He sees his father holding the hammer above his head, about to kill him. Dalton screams and attacks his father, then suddenly finds himself in another dark room. The lights come back on, and he realizes he's in a place that looks like a stage, replaying moments from his past. He then realizes that he had been asleep in his room the entire time. Chris arrives and starts talking to him, but Dalton isn't paying attention at all. He's focused on something terrifying, which causes him to run, fall, and lose consciousness. He then enters a horrifying room filled with strange objects and disturbing music, standing there completely frozen. At the same time, Josh is holding the lantern and searching for Dalton. He sees a ghost that looks exactly like him. He then enters a dark room and sees himself carrying Dalton when he was a child. Meanwhile, in the real world, Dalton appears to be possessed, as if demons have taken control of him, and we see Grace absolutely terrified. We return to Dalton in the room, where he imagines his father dragging him by the leg with chains. He closes his eyes, and when he opens them, he sees his father freeing him instead. His father explains that he never wanted to kill him, but that a red-faced demon was controlling him. The two of them escape together, and Josh manages to close the red door before the demon can reach them. Josh holds the door shut and yells at Dalton to run before it opens. Dalton runs far away. At the same time, Chris struggles against Dalton's possessed body. Meanwhile, Renai watches Josh sleeping and calls out to him. When Josh hears her voice, he decides that everything must end with him. Renai suddenly notices that Josh's body stops moving and panics. Josh is standing silently behind the door when the demon starts smashing through it. At that moment, Dalton returns to his real body and paints the red door black. Josh's father fights to keep the demon from crossing over. Josh steps away from the door and sees it completely covered in black paint. Everything fades into darkness, and a single light appears, illuminating the room. Josh sees his father, Ben, smiling at him. Josh smiles back, relieved, as he watches his father fade away. Josh then grabs the lantern and returns to his real body. Renai is overwhelmed with relief and happiness when she realizes that both Josh and Dalton are finally okay. She calls Dalton and finds him sitting next to Chris, happy that everything has changed for the better. The next day, Josh leaves Renai's house in a great mood after she invites him to dinner. As he walks to his car, he hears someone say that Renai's house is very beautiful. When he turns around, he sees Elise. She tells him that she knew his mother and reminds him to always stay grounded and strong. Josh smiles at her and gets into his car, but when he looks in the mirror, Elise is gone. We cut to Dalton, who has finished his painting and hangs it on the wall, staring at it for a long moment. He then hears Josh's voice behind him. They immediately hug each other and stand together, looking at the image of Josh and Dalton side by side. And that brings us to the end of today's film. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.